Okay, now that we've got our Damascus billets all ground down, flush, and pretty, we're going to talk about etching. Etching, I do all my etching in ferric chloride. Ferric chloride is nothing more than PCB archer etchant that you buy from Radio Shack. Haven't bought it in a while, so I'm guessing it's probably $5 to $7 a bottle. This is diluted, and I strongly encourage you to dilute the stuff with distilled water. A lot of people will try to use tap water, well water, whatever they have available at their home. There are things in that water that can mess up your etch. You want to get as pure water as you can to dilute this. The way I dilute this stuff is simply I'll dump the entire bottle into an old plastic milk jug that's been cleaned real well. Then I'll use this same bottle as a measuring device. Then I'll fill it up 3 times with distilled water, each time emptying into the same jug that the original solution's in. Once you've done that, and it's up to about room temperature, it's pretty much ready to use. What I use for holding my etchant is a piece of PVC pipe that I've made with a screw-on cap, just like you would see a sewer pipe. And on this one I have a heating pad wrapped around. This heating pad lets you warm that solution up to a level when the shop's cold or things like that. The second tank you see located is my TSP solution, or trisodium phosphate, which is basically nothing more than a neutralizer once I'm done etching. The billets that we have to etch, we've got our random pattern, our twist pattern, our ladder, and our pool and eye. Alright, we've talked about the etchant tanks, the neutralizing solution. Okay, now let's talk about finish and cleaning your blades. If you're going to etch on straight steel blades, I highly encourage you to learn how to do the good finishes such as satin, mirrors, that sort of thing. Master those prior to going into an etch. I have a tendency to etch most of my straight steel blades simply because that's what's come to be expected of me. And I do all the differential hardening and all that, so it also adds a bit of sight value, for lack of a better term, to the piece. Important thing in etching, you need to have all your billets down. We've taken these billets down on the surface grinder to a 400 grit finish. I personally prefer to go to at least a 600, preferably a 1200 before I etch. A word of caution, a lot of people want to buff their billets. Do not, and I repeat, do not buff your billets, especially Damascus, prior to etching. Leave the buffing, if you must do it, for after you're done etching. All buffing does in a billet of this nature prior to etching is it tends to smear the surface. So you're going to get real grainy looking or real blurry looking, or even what some of us term dirty Damascus. In these particular billets, just for the sake of the video, I've drilled a hole in each corner so I can hold them by a wire in the tank. Routinely what I'll do if I'm etching just a straight billet for sale to someone else, I'll wrap a real thin stainless steel wire around it and then suspend it in the solution that way. Oftentimes when you do that you'll get a little line, but that's just the breaks of doing it that way. Okay, now let's talk about cleaning our billets prior to etching. We've got them ground down to the desired grit we want. As you can see, I'm putting on latex gloves. Anything that's on these billets, grease, oil, fingerprints, saliva from you talking too close to them and spitting on them, anything like that's going to affect your etch. So what I do is the best thing I found to clean with is acetone. I keep an old Dawn dishwashing bottle of acetone full all the time. I'll put on my latex gloves. This is not so much to protect me because the etching is very mild. This is to protect the fingerprints from getting on the blades. As far as cleaning cloths, try to stay away from old t-shirts and that sort of thing. Who knows what's in them? If you happen to run across a decal or a transfer that's on a t-shirt and you wipe it across the blade, it's going to leave a streak. The best thing I found is just these cheap blue paper towels that they sell at Walmart, Sam's Club, or things like that. They just call them shop towels on a roll. And this lint-free rag, we're just going to saturate with a little bit of acetone. Then I'm going to clean the billet off. You can see, looking at the towel, all the crud and dirt that's on that billet. All that's going to do is fill up everything and prevent it from etching. Now, one of the keys I found too is included in this Once you've cleaned off with a saturated towel, go to a dry towel. This will get any residue off, anything that may have landed on the billet, anything of that nature. And all I use is just stainless steel tie wire to hang my billets from. I'll put it through the hole like that. A lot of times, as is now, this tank of etching has got various things floating on top of it. Not a good thing. What I'll do when I see stuff like that floating on top the etchant is I'll take a paper towel, just go around it, clean all that junk off the surface. That paper towel can just go right in the garbage with no problems. Once I've done that, then I'll dip the billet in for just a few moments. I always have a tendency to pull that billet back out to see if it's etching. So far I don't see any streaks, any runs, or anything like that, so our billet's etching pretty good. And I'll put it in there. We'll do the same thing to each of the successive billets. Anyway, what we'll do is we'll continue with the rest of these billets. We'll do them in the same manner as we did the first one. A word about etching time. The slower your etch, the better your etch is going to come out. The crisper, the cleaner, and by that, that's all going to depend on your solution. If you have a real strong, like a 1-to-1 mix of ferric chloride, it's going to etch a whole lot faster, and your etch is going to look kind of sloppy. If you mix that up 3-to-1, it's going to etch a lot slower. Likewise, temperature plays a big part in this. If your temperatures are high on your etchant, it's going to etch fast, but it's also going to have a tendency to leave little pits and voids and things like that, which in the end product are really ugly. Keep in mind, etch slow. If it takes anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes, even a half an hour to do this etch, hey, that's fine. You're going to have a better end product to deal with. So anyway, I'll go ahead, we'll take a break, I'll get the rest of these billets prepped, and then we'll get them into the etchant and hopefully show you what we look like. We've left them in long enough. Now what we're going to do is we're going to pull them out. I'm going to show you what they look like, and then we're going to neutralize them. This is our pool and eye pattern. Again, this pattern could be a lot finer. We only went to 120 layers on this one just for the sake of the video. So now what I do is just go directly into the trisodium phosphate, and I'll let it soak in there for just a few minutes. The next billet to come out is our ladder pattern. This is obviously not as tight as some ladder patterns, but you can see where we cut the ladders here, 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 and here. This pattern would probably look a lot better at around 300, 320 layers. You'd have a lot tighter pattern and a lot bolder ladders. But again, for the sake of the video, we stopped at 120 layers. Next is our twist Damascus. This one was only 30 layers. Therefore you see all the real bold striping throughout it. And in this billet, as with all these billets, the brighter stripes that you see are the 15N20, the darker stripes are the 1084. As a general rule, anything with a higher alloy content, particularly involving a nickel alloy, is going to wind up etching a little bit brighter. This is something to take into consideration when you're mixing your billets up. Finally, our random pattern. This is nothing more than basically we forged it out without any patterning involved just to see what we'd get. This is another 120 layer billet, excuse me. And what I've done on this to illustrate a point is I've left this portion of the billet about 2 inches. This one I've forged down to 1 inch. The reason I've done this is you can see how the layers, when forged, are forced around the curvature of the profile. This is one important reason why we forge, because all steels contain a grain structure. It's very much like a forged or a ground crankshaft in an automobile. Obviously, if the grain follows the contour of the part, it only stands to reason that part's going to be a bit stronger. Okay, now that we're completed with this, we're going to go ahead and put it in the trisodium phosphate to neutralize all of the etchant. Then I'll show you how I clean the billets up and finish them up after we're completed. Okay, we've got our etchant done. We've been in the trisodium phosphate to neutralize the etchant. Now what we've got left is just a sludgy film all over the surface of our billet. All I do is use a pad of 4/0 steel wool, and I go to the slack bucket that's underneath my grinder. All I'm doing is scrubbing all the crud and everything else off of this billet. This is the same procedure I use when I'm etching a blade. I don't know if you can hear it on the tape or not, but it's starting to get where it's squeaking on me. That's what I'm looking to do. That lets me know that I've got all that junk off of it. And there's our finished billet. Okay, we've scrubbed all the sludge off of our billet. The last steps that I do is simply dry the billet off thoroughly. I'll clean it one more time with acetone. You can see we're getting more junk off of it. Make sure it's good and dry. And then there's all kinds of things out there that people use to protect blades with. Quite honestly, for about the last 7 or 8 years, this is the product I've used. It's Mother's Carnauba wax, cleaner wax. Comes from Walmart. It's about $7 or $8 a can. There's enough wax in here to last me about 1.5 years. I've tried Renaissance wax. It's a good product. I'm just not real fond of it. I've tried all the high dollar things. The only thing I can recommend you don't put on a Damascus blade or any other blades is a specific wax that has silicone in it. There are several name brands that contain silicone. What I've found is that silicone has a tendency, if there's any moisture on this blade when you rub it on, the silicone in that traps that moisture between the surface and the wax. And you're going to wind up getting rust spots and things like that, tarnishes, everything else. That pretty much concludes this video. What I'll do is I'll finish up the rest of these billets, clean them up, wax them up, and then we'll let Gene take a finishing shot of all those videos, and then we'll close this one out. Thanks for watching. It's really appreciated, and we'll see you in a little while.